Hey everyone, this is Coloring Chemist. My name is Connie and welcome back to my channel. So I originally was going to make this all one video, but this is now part 2 of my sort of deep dive into Faber-Castell Pitt Pens and also sort of similar. The Stettler company makes a similar pen. It's their pigment brush pens. So in this part of the video, we're going to take a look at how to use them in coloring books for adult coloring, both. Well, sort of starting with maybe the more beginner-friendly ways to use them, and then moving into, I don't know, I hesitate to call them advanced. They're not really advanced techniques, but maybe a little bit less beginner-friendly. But certainly I think accessible to everybody. The more advanced techniques just take a little bit more practice, that's all. So without further ado, here we are. We will get into taking a look at how to use these pens in some various coloring books. All right, so I have a selection of coloring books here. Mostly because I'm trying to look at different kinds of paper, because paper is going to be important when you're using, well, paper is important for any kind of medium when you're doing coloring in art, isn't it? But it is important when you're working with these pigment-based inks. The smoother the paper, the better result you're going to get. So you probably don't see me using Pitt pens in Amazon print books, but I could, and I will show you here today a little bit, what that looks like and maybe why I don't. I use them a lot in Joanna Basford's books. I use them a lot in Rita Berman's books. I'm finding they work really well in Maria Trolla's books. They probably, I don't know that I've used them in Kirby, but if Kirby has similar paper to Joanna Basford, right, they're going to be okay there. So I talked about sort of the basics. What are some beginner-friendly techniques you can use with Pitt pens? So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that first in an Amazon print book. And then I'll show you the same technique in some of these books with better paper, and you'll see why I say the Pitt pens are going to work better with the better paper. So this is a US print Amazon book. I do have this lost and found from 5 countries total, so 4 other countries, because I had done a series where I compared the paper. So the US paper is probably the least smooth. It's probably the thinnest, and yeah, it's definitely got a bit of a tooth there. So I thought, well, I'm going to show you what Pitt pens look like here. This is probably, I would say, almost worst case scenario with Pitt pens. So if you have Pitt pens and you were thinking about using them to color, but you color almost exclusively on this Amazon paper, I don't think you're going to like the kind of results you're getting. Just as a caveat. You may, and if you do, that is perfectly okay. But if you bought some Pitt pens because you were hoping to use them, and then you started using them on Amazon paper and you're like, but this isn't working out at all, that's probably why. So one of the first sort of beginner techniques you can use with Pitt pens is just basing, using them to base. So I've got here May Green, which I think is my favorite Faber-Castell color of all. I just love this color. And you can use them to base even if you don't want to do any shading with them. That's maybe a more advanced technique. And I can zoom down in here a bit. Here's our adorable little guy. But I need some leaves up here. So if I use this to base, it's a little splotchy. If you see that, we can zoom down even more if we want. See that? It's not super even, and it's because of this paper. But you can then take any pencils, really, but these are some polychromos because, of course, the color lines match between the Pitt pens and polychromos. So I have Permanent Green Olive 167, which is a color that I often use in Pitt pens to blend with this May Green 170. But if you're not feeling real confident using, 2 different Pitt pens to do blending on paper, lay down a base layer. Does it go through? It it does ghost. Can you see that? And I think if I were to try and do some blending with Pitt pens on this paper, it probably would go through. So it says it doesn't go through paper, but that's if you put down one layer. And at the top and bottom of this leaf, of course, because I was going back and forth, the top and the bottom kind of got more than one layer. So you can see it went through a little bit there. So again, they're just not going to be the best on Amazon paper. But you can then take pencils and you can do shading on top. So if I want to kind of do a little shading, that wasn't maybe the best choice. What have I got? A little bit pine green, that's a little bit darker. So you can go on top. You can put some shading down. And I can use this to maybe blend it out a little bit more. So the Pitt pens are going to act as your base, and they're going to save your hands a little bit. That's where I really, really like them, because I do tend to have some hand troubles. And with the Pitt pens, I mean, that was super fast and easy to base. And then you can just do shading on top with pencil. Doesn't have to be polychromos pencils. You can shade with whatever pencils you like. But these do work really nicely. And they're nice and pigmented. They work really nicely as a base layer. If you're going to use them as just for basing, then I would buy open stock. And I would just purchase kind of the colors that you would be more likely to use for basing. So, you know, light green. You're going to want light colors for basing. I didn't add this before, so I thought I would just stick it in now. If I were going to buy some Pitt pens open stock that had colors that were, you know, light and pale that I could use for basing things. Wait, I'm going to add one more. This is probably the selection that I would go with. So here we've got the white, and these are all the brush, sort of regular Pitt pens. So here we've got the white, 101, ivory, 103, pale pink, 114, lilac, 239, light indigo, 220, ice blue, 148, sky blue, 146, light green, 171, May green, 170, earth green, 172, nougat, 178, and raw umber, 180. Now, I color a lot of landscapes, so this would sort of cover me for landscapes. If you are going to base for skin tones, I'm afraid I don't know how much help I will be, because I just don't color people. There are some lighter colors. You've got this 116 apricot for pale skin tones. This 132, which is called beige red, although I believe these used to be called light flesh and medium flesh or something like that, which is ridiculous because obviously not everyone is pale. But yeah, for darker skin tones, you've got cinnamon, but I'm not a great person to ask about skin tones just because I don't tend to color people. So, you know, for me, this is, if I was just going to use them for basing, isn't that a pretty kind of spring palette there too? But these are some of the colors that I would maybe look for open stock. This light indigo in particular, super useful. And it's not a color that occurs in either the Polychromos or the Albrecht Dürer lines. It's just in the Pitt pen line. I don't know why, but it is. It's a fantastic color for glass, for water. It's blue, but it's not... Yeah, it's just a fantastic color, and it goes wonderfully with this sky blue. So these two together. The ice blue is a little bit more greeny. The lilac is nice and pale. The pale pink is pink with a little bit of a orangey kind of undertone, so it's like a peachy pink. But yeah, the white and the ivory, and then you've got your greens here. The earth green is more of an olivey green, and these two browns are great if you're going to be basing, you know, wood or trees or that sort of thing. But yeah, that would be a selection of some open stock ones that I would suggest you get if you want to try them for basing. Two colors that I missed on my selection there of light colors that I would get for basing. Warm gray 1, 270, and cold gray 1, 230. I think I would also add those in. I use this warm gray 1 all the time for everything. I can't believe I forgot it. And then the cold gray 1, 230. But, you know, for things like rocks, stone, brickwork, that sort of thing. And again, this was just the list for, you know, if you're going to use them for basing. Obviously, if you're going to use them and do shading with them, you know, with other Pitt pens, you're going to need darker shades. But this was just sort of a list for, yeah, light colors if you want to use them for basing. So I did forget those two grays. Enough of my little interlude here, talking about the colors that I would use for basing. Now we'll get back to the main part of the video where I was doing some demonstrating of how I use Pitt pens for coloring. So let's try this one. That's a nice color as well. Again, if I wanted to go on top, probably before you go on top with your pencils, I mean, let it dry it doesn't even take that long to dry. But otherwise, it's like any wet media. If you then try and go on top with pencils too soon, it just kind of tears at the paper. Again, maybe it wasn't the best color choice. There's not a real difference in shade and tone between the two. Those probably aren't the right art words either. My apologies. But you can see, you can do a little bit of shading on top, right? So that's a pretty easy way to use Pitt pens. You can use them the other way around if you want. So let's say I just wanted to just quickly color in that leaf. So this was 167 permanent green olive. I can take 167 permanent green olive Pitt pen, and I can, if you wanted kind of that, it's more of a, I think maybe a little kid look. That's kind of how we would have colored when we were little kids. You know, you outline things in markers or crayons and then color in. But you know what? There's something, I don't know, comforting about that, isn't there? You don't have to worry about shading. There it is. And you know these two are going to work together because they're color matched, right? They're both 167 permanent green olive. If I put burnishing pressure down for the polychromos, it's going to come out almost exactly the same shade as the Pitt pen does. But by doing it like that, it's like I got those two different shades of the same color. So that's another really quick and easy way you can use Pitt pens in your coloring. Just gonna take a look. And again, you know, for that kind of coloring, I mean, again, this is worst case scenario, right? I can see the printing through this paper. So the fact that I can see a little bit of ghosting, you know, on these other areas where I use Pitt pens, I can see a little tiny bit of bleed through on that first leaf we did just because I overlapped top and bottom. The second leaf, I actually don't see any. And then that leaf where I just sort of did that outlining, I don't see any there. So the fact that I can see ghosting through this paper, you know, I can see the printing through this paper. So that's not bad, you know, not bad at all. They do on this paper, they feather a little bit, they spread a little bit, just the tiniest bit. And what I mean by that is when you put markers to paper, particularly a rougher kind of paper like this, right, that's not really smooth, when you put that ink down, basically when papers like this aren't smooth, the little fibers that make up the paper haven't been sort of polished or burnished on the surface. So you've got all these little kind of rough fibers sticking up. And when you put ink down, kind of you're putting your pen down in a place where you want the ink, but the little fibers next to it will also, you know, kind of lean over and grab some of that ink and pull it off to the side. I mean, that's what feathering is. That's why it's happening, and that's why it happens on rougher papers. There's a tiny bit of feathering that I see, particularly where I did the outline of the leaf there. So if you're using these just to do, you know, straight coloring on Amazon paper, just be aware of how close you are to the line art, right? It's not like alcohol markers. It's not going to seep way over the line art, but you may get, and I'm seeing it just as it's drying there, a tiny bit of feathering just on a few places. So if you don't want it to feather over the line art, just stay just a hair inside the line art, right? So yeah, I mean, you can do straight coloring like that. You can use, you've got different colors, and I can make leaves different colors. They're super pigmented. And you know what? The fact that they almost give a little bit of a mottled look when you're coloring on Amazon paper can almost work in your favor, because it almost looks like you have put a little bit of, not so much shading, but almost like a little bit of texture into your coloring when you really didn't. You were just coloring with the Pitt pens on the paper, but because the paper is, it's not great paper, it produces a little bit of modeling, and it almost looks like you've got a little bit of texture that you put in there, but you really didn't mean to, but it just happened. So that's kind of fun. So yeah, you can do just plain coloring, you can do basing, you can do outlining with them. If you're going to do outlining, though, they're not going to cover up the line work. Just again, reiterating that. They're pigment ink, but they're not like those acrylic markers. They're not going to cover up that line work. All right. Oh, I will say your white Pitt pen can be your absolute best friend, particularly when you want to do this kind of simple coloring. So let's say I was doing, just simple coloring of these leaves. I wasn't worried about shading. And then afterwards I thought, well, I would like them to look a little bit shaded. But now what do? Particularly say for this dark one, right? Once you put a dark color like that down in marker, I can't erase it. I can't put a lighter green over top. It's not going to show up. That's where this guy comes in. So this is the brush version of the white. I think earlier I had also showed you, right, there's a bullet version. I like the brush version better for this kind of thing. I just find it's got a smaller tip, gives me better control. Let's say I wanted a little bit of shadow either side of the midline of that leaf. Because that's opaque, you can put it right on top of the other color. And if you find that that's too, the lines, maybe the lines you drew don't look natural enough for you, you can kind of put the lines down. What I like to do is take my finger right away, just kind of tap it. Just kind of softens that a bit. Now, can you see? Now up close, it looks like you put a dark color down and then put white over top of it. But from a distance, what it looks like is you did two-tone shading on that leaf, but you didn't really. You cheated. You used this guy. And you can do that all over the place. If I wanted the center of that leaf on either side a little bit lighter, there. Maybe I want the tip of this leaf a little bit lighter. Maybe I want the tip of this leaf a little bit lighter. And it's going to make more difference, obviously, on the darker colors, right? I'm not seeing it a whole lot there at all, whereas I did see it there. I see it a little bit more there, right? But that putting this down and then tapping with you are going to get white ink on your finger, and then tapping it off with your finger I use that technique all the time. It's super fast, super easy, and particularly when you've got items like this, I'm going to come out, and I often think about this in coloring. I'll look at something I've done and I'll think, okay, if I look up really close, is the blend super smooth? Not as smooth as it would be if I was using exclusively pencils? No. But from a distance, this to me looks like a leaf that's just got lighter bits inside. I've lightened up the insides there. I've lightened up the tip there. And, for particularly small areas like all these leaves, it means that I don't have to spend a lot of time and then, get a lot of hand pain from doing all of this really intricate shading. Now, if you love doing all that intricate pencil shading, go for it. Absolutely go for it. There's a part of me that would like to do it, but it hurts my hands too much. So this, using this technique with the white and, it just makes things so much quicker. So I would say those are your beginner-friendly ways of using Pitt pens. Basing, straight coloring, outlining if you want to do that kind of, and then with some pencils, and then using your white to put in highlights, to lighten areas. And you know what? Let's say I did this white, I look at this leaf and I think, no, I don't like that. You can't erase it, but what you can do is you can go back over the same color that I had in there before. And I don't know if you can still maybe see it's a little bit lighter than it was. But it covers it up not bad. So you can kind of, fix the white Pitt pen too. All right. So let's go into a little bit more advanced techniques now. These basic techniques are going to work on, Amazon paper. They're going to work on the better papers. I mean, you can use these to base on double-sided coloring books. I mean, this is single-sided, but let's take a look at, this is a Rita Berman. This is the compilation book, and I've got a picture of flowers. Maybe that wasn't the best. Maybe I need something with green leaves. You know what? I'll take this one. So if I just want to, base some leaves here, I can take, this is 171 light green. If you can see there, it looks much less mottled here than it did because this is smoother paper, right? And then I can go on top, and I can put shading at the bottom there. I can even, again, probably should have chosen darker colors. This one's a little bit darker. You can sort of play around. And then it's not the greatest shading, but you can get a little bit of shading done on smoother paper. You can do, say I wanted the tip to be a little bit lighter still. There. So those same techniques work on this better paper. A more advanced Pitt pen technique, and you'll see me doing this all the time when I color, is shading with the Pitt pens themselves. So I'm not using pencils for shading. I will occasionally bring in a pencil. Because there are only 60 colors of the Pitt pens, there occasionally is times when I want a color used to shade that just simply doesn't exist in Pitt pens, and it's easier for me to bring in a pencil to do the shading. But oftentimes you will see me just using Pitt pens to shade. So here I've got May Green 170, Olive Green 167, and this Light Green 171. If I'm going to do shading with Pitt pens, I like taking all of the caps off, putting them aside. Now you can, the caps on Pitt pens do post, is that the word? They will post on the ends, so if you're worried about, forgetting which cap is which. Now the nice thing about the caps, let's flip these over, so you can see that's the order, so it goes dark, medium, and light. You see the cap ends? Dark, medium, light. So the color here matches the color of the barrel. So even if I took these off and put them on my desk, I think I would still be able to put the right caps back on the right pens. You can't leave these uncapped for a long time. They will start to dry out, but as long as you're sort of continuously using them, it'll be fine. So two different ways of doing shading. And I'll show you the way that I don't use first. Sorry, the focus is kind of going in and out. I don't know if I can do anything about that. So I apologize if it's kind of wonky on the eyes. You can lay down your dark shadow areas first. So let's say I want to make the bottom of this leaf dark, and then mid. So I'm kind of going back over the dark area with the mid-tone color, and then I go over the whole thing with the light tone. See that? So that is one way to do the shading. And I will also say that when I am shading with, lost my piece of paper. When I am shading with Pitt pens, I always have just a scrap piece of paper off to the side, because, you know, particularly this light one, I went over top of both the dark and the medium. It's going to have picked up some of that darker ink. So I will just scribble it off to the side. So you can see, I just scribble it off, just to make sure that there's no darker ink left on it, so that when I go to use it the next time, there's not dark ink left. I can also do the same thing with the mid-tone, right? Because I did go over that darker ink, so I just scribble it off to the side to make sure that there's no darker ink left. Don't have to do that with the darkest because it didn't go over top of anything. I prefer, though, if I'm going to do that kind of shading, I prefer to put a layer of the lightest down first. And what I find, if I do that, it almost allows these other two to sit longer on top of the page. And I get a much better movement, and I think a much better blend of the inks doing it that way. Now, I can really zoom in here to see if you can see. Oh. Nope. Never mind, that's as zoomed in as I can go, so I'll have to lift them up. Can you see the difference between the shading there and the shading there? Now, they're still drying. They will, and they look kind of speckly right now. That speckliness will kind of go away. It just needs to dry. There's a lot of layers of ink there. But I think I got a better blend on that leaf than I did on that one. And I got the better blend by putting down that layer of light ink first. So once again, I'm just going to scribble off the light ink, make sure I don't have any dark on there. I put down a layer of the light. Then I go in with my darkest. Put in where I want the shadows to be. Then my medium. Kind of go back over the dark, and basically I'm almost pulling it out, pulling it forward. And then I go in with the light again and just sort of pull from where that medium was. Kind of go back over everything. And then I get that blend. Now, maybe you wanted, basically the lightest color isn't so light at the tip anymore. You can also blend like this. Put down a layer, put down the dark, down the medium, so we're pulling. And then instead of taking the light and starting down here and pulling forward, you can start at the tip and kind of pull the other way. It still is going to blend the sort of the line where those two colors meet, but once this dries, it will have preserved more of that light color at the tip than here, because here and here I was pulling some of that darker and the mid-tone color forward, right to the tip of the leaf, whereas here, by going the other way, I can preserve more of that light color at the tip of the leaf. So with blending, sometimes it matters too where you sort of start your stroke, if that, if you understand what I'm saying there. If you don't want to move color, then, but you want to blend out a line, don't start in the darker area. Start in the lighter area and pull your stroke back towards the darker area. You'll still blend out the line, but you won't be pulling the darker ink into the area that you want to stay lighter. If you do want to pull the darker ink into the area, then start in the darker ink and pull it forward. But you can see how much movement you get there when you have a layer of the light ink down first. Versus up here, I can still see, there's kind of a line right there, even as it's drying. That's pretty much dry. Oh, sorry, off screen there. Here's where I didn't put a layer of the light ink down first. I can see a pretty distinct line between the light and the medium there. So I think I got better blends by putting a layer of the light down first. So I would say that's probably key to this blending. And the great part about the movement of these inks is, let's say I had these leaves down here. Let's say I'm only going to use 2 colors instead of a 3-color blend. I'll do this, want to get these leaves done really fast. Put down a layer of the lightest. This is the darkest. So if you look at there's a lot of difference between those 2 greens. Right? If I put down that green, that's dark. But as long as I work quick enough and I start down, can you see how much I'm pulling that dark ink forward? Scribble off the light pen. Now go back the other way just to smooth it out. There's a blend with just two inks. Is it as perfect as a pencil blend would be? No. But you know what? Again, I'm okay with that. I've been trying to spend a lot of time looking at things in nature, and the delineation between dark and light isn't always perfectly smooth. It's, sometimes it's quite abrupt, whether it be from the way light falls or just simply, variations in texture within, leaves and petals and all those kinds of things. It's not always a smooth blend from sort of dark through medium through light. Sometimes it's abrupt. So, the fact that it's not a perfectly smooth blend, I'm okay with that. Now, if you're not okay with that, maybe Pitt pens aren't for you, or maybe just use them for basing. I realized there's one technique that I forgot to show you guys, and it is the tip-to-tip technique. So I've got my 3 greens again here. So I was doing shading on, right on the paper. You can, if you want, so the tip-to-tip technique looks like this. I'll zoom out just a little bit so it's not quite so close. Maybe I would take, let's say, I've got light green 171 and May green 170. I could shade these 2 on the paper, or take the caps off both. I can take the tip of the lighter one and just sort of hold it to the tip of the darker one, just for a few seconds. And that will have transferred some of the darker ink onto the lighter pen. So that then means that, zoom back in here, if I now put this lighter pen down to paper, I should get some of the darker ink, which will then transition out into the lighter ink. Although, you know what, let me get, I think that May green was too light. Where's my, here. We'll do light green 171 to olive green 167. I think that'll be a better show of this. So again, I'm going to take the light and just touch it to the dark for a couple seconds. Let some of that dark ink transfer to the end of the light. Put the dark ink aside. And if I go to color now, that dark ink comes out first. Now, if you're in a small area like that, I may have put too much dark ink on here, so I can just scribble off to the side a bit until I lose some of that dark ink. And then I can also kind of turn it over. And then I can let it transition to a lighter ink. I think I've still even got some, well, a little bit of dark ink maybe left on there. But yeah, you can do that tip to tip technique. You just need to, I probably held it to the dark ink too long. So let's just, 2, I don't know. You could count if you want. Let's see if we get a better transition here. Well, that might still have been too long. Ink transfers quickly. So, I mean, we're working in small spaces here. So let's just touch it. That maybe wasn't enough. So, I mean, you can play around with it, right? But yeah, you can do that tip to tip technique. I could also scribble some of this dark ink on like a smooth palette, like a Caran d'Ache palette, and then pick it up with the lighter pen, and you know, you would get the same kind of thing. So if I just zoom out here a bit, where's my palette? So the Caran d'Ache palette has a rough side and a smooth side, so you're going to want the smooth side. You don't need one of these. You could just even a little like a ceramic paint palette, or I know Jennifer Stay, I've seen her use like an old CD case, you know, the hard plastic. That's all you need. So I can just scribble just a little bit there, and then I can use the light one, pick up just a little bit of that ink on the tip there, and I can go in, and it'll be darker, and then it'll transition to light. And if I think that's not quite dark enough, I can pick up a little bit more at the bottom. And you can get some really nice blends that way, because it's sort of naturally, you know, you use that dark ink and it's sort of fading as the lighter ink is coming from inside this pen and sort of, you know, basically pushing it out onto the paper. And so you can get some really nice blends that way too. So, sorry, that was another just little, again, I hesitate to say advanced technique, but maybe not quite so beginner-friendly technique, but once again, you know, just another way of using these pens to do shading on paper. Okay, so that's a little bit more advanced technique, is the blending, but like I say, by putting a layer of the light ink down first, it does give you some time to be able to move those pigments on the paper. Sorry, I had to pause there and cough a little bit. Let's go back to, so let's switch out our books. Let's go back to this one. Sorry, I know I'm really zoomed in, but I'm going to need to be zoomed in here in a minute anyway. Let's pick leaves that are a little further down. There, so I can... let's do those leaves. Let's see if we can do a 3-color blend on these leaves on Amazon paper. And I think you're going to see you're going to see why, if you're using Pitt pens on Amazon paper, I think you're going to be a little bit frustrated. So let's try our 2 different techniques again. So in the first one, I won't put down a light layer first. I'm going to go in with my dark, and then my medium, and then my light. Now I kept going over that and over that, hoping that I could get those 3 to blend out a little bit. Not really, right? Certainly not the level of blend that I got on the other paper. So let's try this leaf here, and let's lay down a layer of the light first, like we did in the other paper, and then we'll go in with the dark, and then the medium, and then the light. That's better, I think, but it still doesn't look as good as it did on the smooth paper, does it? So, yeah, I think if you're going to use Pitt pens for blending, like I do when I, show my coloring videos sometimes, I don't think Amazon paper is going to be your best bet. It's just not. Now, having said that, the Japanese Amazon paper is very smooth. Now, I know a lot of you don't have the Japanese Amazon paper, so, I didn't figure there's any point in me, demoing that. But a smoother paper is going to allow that pigment to not bind to the paper as quickly. It's going to sit on top, particularly if you put down a layer of your light first, and you're going to be able to move the pigment more. It did work doing that here a little bit better, but still not great. Now, I'm curious. Yeah, can you see? If you do blending with Pitt pens on a thin paper like this, it's going to bleed through. It just will. So, Amazon paper, probably not your best bet. Zoom back out again here. There we go. I think if you want to do blending in Joanna Basford's books, I actually have Worlds of Wonder here, and I have the OR coloring book for the curious, so this is a US version, and the OUR, see the covers are different, isn't that neat? The OUR version, so this is the UK version. I think the UK paper is smoother, and so if I go to, and Joanna of course always gives us these lovely test palettes at the back of the book here. So there's the UK paper. I'm going to get this out of the way just for comparison's sake. So there's the UK paper. There's the US paper. This is whiter. This is yellower. This definitely has more of a tooth, and this has less of a tooth. This is quite smooth. So if I try and do a 3-color blend on the 2 different papers, and you notice I did cap them, just they will dry out kind of quickly. Okay, so let us tackle the UK paper first. There we go. So we've got some little leaves up there. Can I go any further? That's as far as I can go. I think these larger leaves were done. I did them already on the other one, but you know what? That's okay. We'll do them here. So let me do my typical way of blending first. So we're going to color the whole leaf with the lightest color. And we're going to take our dark, and I'll do a little dark top and bottom, medium, kind of go back over that dark, pull it out a bit. With my scribble paper here. And then the light, I'm going to pull out those colors a bit, but not quite to the center. Go back. So we'll let that dry. We'll see what that looks like. And then maybe for this leaf here, I'll do the way I typically don't, which is dark, medium, and then light. I mean, it worked not bad. This is the really smooth Joanna Basford paper, and so, you can move those pigments around. So let's let that dry. And let's pull the US page over here. Sorry. Well, we have one leaf here. So let's do my typical. So light, dark, medium, pull that dark a little bit, and then use the light to pull, go back over. All right. And then one of these leaves over here will do what I typically don't. Now these are smaller leaves, so it's a pretty tiny area to do a 3-color blend, but we'll try. Maybe I won't do the top. we'll just do sort of a blend from the bottom here. There. And you notice I'm always scribbling off, which, I mean, I guess some folks might be concerned that, you know, I'm wasting ink, but they do dry out. Pitt pens probably, I mean, they obviously have pigment ink in them. They have water. I'm guessing because they are actually waterproof once dry, they're also alcohol proof once dry, which means if you put down a layer of Pitt pen, let it dry completely, you should be able to go over top of it with alcohol ink and it shouldn't smear. You should be able to go over top of it with another water-based kind of ink. Shouldn't smear. But you have to let it completely dry first. So I'm guessing because of that, there probably is maybe some shellac in here. But what they don't seem to have a lot of is some kind, they call it a humectant. And it's an additive that they can put in markers and inks and things like that to make them stay, well, so they don't dry out if they're uncapped. I know Stettler has, they make fine liners, and I think they say something about 24-hour non-dry or 48-hour. In other words, if you accidentally leave the cap off for 24 or 48 hours, they won't dry out. I think that's because they have a fair amount of humectant in those inks, but I don't think, I mean, maybe Faber-Castell has some, but, you know, if I left this uncapped for even 15 minutes, I'm going to, when I go to put it to paper, I'm going to find that it's dry. Now you can, it won't be dry as in, oh my gosh, it's dried out, I can't use it. It'll just, when you go to put it to paper, it'll feel dry. Just sort of scribble for a couple seconds and it'll start the ink flowing again. All right, so I'm actually, because I had torn this page of the US one, I'm just going to put this US book to the side. Make things a little easier here. So here we've got, so this one is the UK and this one is US. As close as we can go. So there's UK. Again, not a perfectly smooth blend, but that's, you know, from a distance, it's okay to me. And then there's US. You know, truth be told, I don't see a whole lot of difference. Maybe here. So this is where on the US paper, I didn't put the light layer down first. I just went dark, medium, and light. There I'm seeing a little bit of kind of splotchiness and, excuse me, not great blending. But putting a light layer down first, I think actually, yeah, I think it worked on the US paper too. But I just really like how they work on the UK paper. Once again, if I was looking at this and thinking to myself, you know, I really wish maybe I had left, you know, maybe more of a highlight right there. Or maybe more of a highlight right there. This, I swear, this white Pitt pen, ugh, covers a multitude of sins. Multitude! You could just do all kinds of things with it. Which leads me to another, and I'm going to stick with the UK paper here, just because I like it. This is another, maybe a little bit more advanced technique. It's a blending technique, but it involves the white. And I haven't actually done this one in a while, so hopefully it goes okay. I'm going to choose, this is Pink Madder Lake 129. So it's a kind of a medium pink. Let's say these little flowers here. Let's say I wanted to have a really distinct kind of dark to light. It's a blend, but it's not a gradual blend. You can sort of use this flicking technique. So I'm going to flick the pink down, and then I'm going to take the white and flick that up. See what I did there? Sorry, that's really dark, isn't it? I think it's because I'm so zoomed in. And just the way the camera is, maybe I'm going to come out a little bit. Maybe we can lighten things up a bit here. I have all my lights on too. Goodness. But hopefully you can see that. So I've got, you know, it's between pink and white, which you'd think that's got to be a pretty, you know, there's a lot of contrast there. But because the white is opaque, I can flick it back up over the edge of where the pink was, and in between now I've got lighter pink. And if I want it even lighter, go back over it. I keep scribbling the white off just to make sure, because I didn't let that pink totally dry before I did this. So I might have picked up a little bit of pink with the white pen. But yeah, I mean, that's another technique. So now you've got, you know, a pink that goes into a lighter pink and then into white on the edges of the petal with only, you know, I've got a pink and a white, and that's it. So if you've got colors that you want to, you know, have a blend, but there isn't a lighter color available to do kind of the mid-tone aspect of it, just use your white and go over, you know, the flicking is going to work better than putting a straight, you know, you notice when I was putting the pink down, it wasn't like a straight line of pink. I sort of flicked it to make it kind of uneven and jagged. The same thing with the white when I was flicking up, uneven and jagged. Otherwise, if you just do a straight line, it is going to look a little bit weird. But yeah, that's another technique with Pitt pens. Oh, let's say you wanted, this isn't really advanced, but let's say you wanted a pink flower, but you wanted an even darker version of this pink. So in other words, I wanted darker and then lighter down at the tips. But the tips, I actually wanted this color pink. You can color the whole thing. And then if you go over, can you see how I've made that darker? It's the same shade, but it's darker. Now, I probably want to let that dry just a little bit, and then I can put another layer on the top third, and another, and another. And you can do shading with just one pen. So, you know, you've got a little bit of a blend there as well. I can also use, where have I got them? You can use your grays. Oh, there it is. For shading. So if I want to shade warm colors like pinks, yellows, oranges, reds, right? I'm going to use my warm grays. If I want to shade cool colors, blues, greens, those sorts of things, I'm going to use my cool grays. So I think there's 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 of the warm grays and cool grays in the small Pitt pens. You can do this one of 2 ways. You can, so I've got warm gray 3 here, 272, and then I've got that same Pink Madder Lake 129. I can put the gray down first and then put the pink over top of it. I don't find that, I don't know if you can kind of, yeah, you can kind of tell, I guess. But if you then put some gray over top, and you can just sort of keep layering them. You know, I can put some more of the pink down. So you can use the gray to create shadows. Say I wanted the tips of the petals. I'm like, no, I want them to be lighter. White to the rescue. Tap it off. Tap it off. Tap it off. The middle one to be a little bit more. And you can get, so now I've got pink, because this is opaque but not completely opaque, the pink is still going to come through, so now it just looks like I have lighter pink at the bottom of the petals. I could do that over here too. So there's all kinds of little tips and tricks you can do with these, you know, the grays and the white, layering up of the same color over and over to get it darker, you know, blending the white into the pink or into, you know, any other color. I also sometimes like to use ivory. Now, the ivory does have a yellowish tinge. So let's say I was going to use the same pink and I wanted to use the ivory to blend out these little petals. I can put a layer of the ivory down, put a little bit of pink at the end, and then use the ivory to pull the pink. But it is going to give it, because the ivory is a little bit, can we go in any further? Not, we cannot. Hopefully you can see that. Because the ivory has got a yellowish tinge, it is going to give the pink a little bit of a, almost like a peachy color. But you can see I'm still getting, you know, it's kind of a new color, really. I think it still has that pink hue to it. Pull it out a little bit. All right. Get the pink off my ivory. Something I just thought of, and I don't often do this. Just now I'm curious if it'll work. What if I took a Tombow blender, or similar, and let's say this is my May green. What if I just put that there? I can do that too. So you can see that. I pulled it out with the Tombow blender. So it is a little bit darker at the bottom. It's lighter up there. So it's a lighter version of May green at the top of the leaf. So there's another. I don't even know if that's a more advanced technique. That's pretty easy. The one thing I did try doing, and they said in, I'm just going to zoom back out because that lighting is terrible. I'm sorry. One of these days I need to get better lighting for my coloring space here. One of the techniques that was suggested in, I'm just going to pull this. This is, and I printed this off from Jet Pens. They had a comprehensive guide to Pitt Pens. Isn't that lovely? So it's on their website. So if you Googled Jet Pens, Pitt Pens guide, I'm sure this will come up. It talks about what Pitt Pens are. You know, they're waterproof, they're copic proof, they're transparent, so you can layer them. They talk about, they are fast drying, but like I say, if you layer them and you know, you can play with that aspect of them. The tips and sizes, the color matching across the Faber-Castell lines. I'm just talking about the tips. What paper to use, works well on any paper. You can actually write on photographs, glossy surfaces. It's best to choose paper with a smooth finish. Well, it says so the tips last longer before they become frayed. I also just find it, like we saw, that you get better blending. If you move fast, you can smudge them with your finger, so you can get kind of an effect doing that too. You can use water to move Pitt pen ink before it dries. Once they're dry, though, they are waterproof. And this was a technique that I've not tried, drawing on wet paper. So it would be like a wet on wet technique with watercolor. So you wet your paper first and then put the Pitt pens down, and you're going to get kind of a watercolor-esque effect. I haven't tried that. That's pretty neat. I did try this. So you scribble some of your Pitt pen on a smooth palette and then pick it up with a water brush or with a paintbrush. I don't know. I mean, I can see what they've done here, right? Because they have a smooth Tombow palette and they've scribbled out like a pink and a yellow and then mix them to get this peachy orange. So you can create a wonderful array of new colors, I'm sure, doing this. But I found when I was doing this, the ink that I was getting that was going down on the paper, I don't know, it didn't move. I was almost losing the pigment aspect of it. I mean, it was less pigmented, but that's not quite what I mean. It was like it wasn't sitting on the surface of the paper, so I couldn't move it. The minute I put it down on the paper, it was like sunk in, and then that was it. I couldn't move it. So I did try this technique on... Was it in this book? Can't remember. Oh, yeah, it was. This is one of my completed pages from February 2024. And I tried that painting technique with the Pitt pens on the leaves. And they look okay, but even now I'm looking at them and I can see where it's kind of splotchy and it just didn't blend the way I normally would have expected Pitt pens to blend. So, I don't know. I don't know that I would suggest try. You could try, absolutely, and see what you think of it. I'm curious about this one, though, the drawing on the wet paper. Now, you saw me pull out the color with this Tombow. I have tried doing that in past with a water brush, and I don't find that works as well. I think maybe because the Tombow has a little bit of glycerin in it, it just helps to move that Pitt pen ink a little bit better. I don't know, but I find that just when I was doing it now, that was a much better experience than when I tried doing that with a water brush. That's why I didn't demonstrate that technique, because I didn't. Water and Pitt pens, to me, even though they're saying you can do it, I don't know, it just doesn't, it doesn't work as well to me. But I had never thought to try the Tombow until I just did now, and that actually worked much better, so I'm going to have to remember that. And then it just talks about journaling and other things you can do. Mixed media, right? Look at this. Oh my goodness, can you imagine being able to do that? They talk about Pitt pens working especially well on toned paper, particularly the white. So, yeah, but just all kinds of wonderful, wonderful things you can do. And like I say, you know, this finished page that I had from February, I did the painting with Pitt pens. So I had scribbled the greens on a palette, and I think I was picking them up with a water brush. But then I did actually... Did I use Pitt pens straight on top of there? I might have, just to try and fix some of the... Just wasn't shading real well. I did regular Pitt pen coloring here. I did... I'm trying to think what else I did. Yeah. I did some blending of colors that were in the same kind of color family. So the leaves here, if I had to guess, that's probably like their beige red maybe, and then their sanguine. But you can also blend, in the butterfly here, I was using the ivory and one of the greens to create kind of a blend. So it's kind of a yellow into a yellow green. That worked really well. So yeah, just all kinds of amazing things you can do. And, you know, I've been using Pitt pens now for a couple of years, and I'm probably most familiar with, you know, sort of how they here's my scribble paper, how they function. More recently, I did get the Stettler version. These, they are the same, but they're also a little bit different. Pitt pens are never shiny. Like the ink that comes out of them is never shiny. It's always translucent. It's always transparent. Some of these Stettler pens, is the red one of them? Maybe not. Well, yeah, maybe. We'll let it dry and then we'll see. Some of them, they're a little tiny bit shiny, even once they're dry, which makes me wonder if maybe there's a little bit more shellac or something like that in the formulation for these. Like, I don't know. They do work well with the Pitt pens, and you know, like this is my sort of combined swatch. So this is just called red in the Stettler line. It's color number 2, so it's 2S on my swatches here. But you can see it is slightly different from 121 Faber-Castell color, which I think is Pale Geranium Lake, and 219, which is Deep Scarlet Red. So there are, you know, the colors in this line I think definitely complement. This is kind of a, well, it's pretty close to a neutral, maybe a little bit on the orangier side, but it's pretty close to a true neutral red, which is something I didn't really have in the Pitt pen line. I had this 121, which was definitely orangier, and this 219, which was a little bit dark for I mean, it's a neutral red, but it was a little bit dark. This is just a nice in-between color. This 4S down here, that's orange in the Stettler line. You can see that's a really nice sort of in-between. 113, which is the Faber-Castell Pitt Pen, that's a little bit lighter. And then 118 up here, that's also Faber-Castell, was darker. So that 4S is just a really, you know, bright primary orange that sort of wasn't there in the Faber-Castell line. So having both sets, and I know they're expensive, it has really been good for me. It seems to give me, you know, the Stettler fills in. Now, some of them are virtually the same. I don't know if you can see right there. There's 148 in the Pitt pens, and there's 310 or 310S in the Stettler pens. I mean, they're virtually the same. Maybe 310 is ever so slightly darker. So, you know, would I need those two colors? No. I mean, they're virtually the same. This 36S is actually a good addition. It's kind of an indigo color, and it's not really the same as 247 or 157 in the Faber-Castell. Yeah. So they're just great pens. I just really, really love coloring with them and working with them. So I hope this video gave you some ideas on some of the different techniques you can try. If you guys have any other techniques, you know, that I haven't mentioned, maybe I haven't thought of, absolutely let me know in the comments below. I'm always, now I'm curious about that wet on wet technique. I have not tried that. Although I kind of know why. Watercolor kind of scares me. Because it's control, right? Even working with Pitt pens, I think I had to learn to let go of a little bit of control, because I think there's less control when working with these than there is with pencils. But watercolor would be even less control. So a wet on wet, yeah, because you don't know what's going to happen. And I think you have to be ready to embrace that. So maybe we'll get to that. I will say that as sort of a general caveat. Give yourself some time to learn how to work with these and use them. If you've just tried it once or twice and you're not getting, you know, the blends that you necessarily maybe see me get, don't worry about it. They will come. It just takes practice. This is not the kind of thing, and it's unlike pencils too, in that you can't really erase. You can cover things up with the white, but you can't erase. So it's scary. You know, you're trying to do this blend and you're like, it's not working. But you just kind of have to go with it, and maybe don't choose your very favorite picture that you've always wanted to color and try to use that as your first go. Maybe that's not such a good plan. You know, try it on some different pictures first. But you just have to practice. I think that's the biggest thing. But hopefully I've given you some techniques to try here that maybe will make your practicing a little bit less frustrating. And I haven't done too many color alongs on my channel just because I'm not ever sure if people really want to see them. But if you do want to see color alongs, particularly with Pitt pens, let me know and I can film some of them. You know, the nice thing is they're kind of a fast medium. So I can do color alongs maybe even in real time and not speed it up. And, you know, even speed it up, I could probably color a small image in, say, Joanna Basford's Small Victories book half an hour if I speed it up. So yeah, if you want to see some color alongs with Pitt pens or the Staedtler version of Pitt pens, just let me know and I can see what I can do. I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone is well. I hope everybody's enjoying their coloring. If you like what you see, consider hitting the like button, subscribing, leaving a comment, letting a friend know you found a channel and you like it, they might like it too. Until next time, folks, take care. Bye-bye.